Hey guys, welcome back to more HOA stories. In this video, a ridiculous HOA president dug up my yard to build an illegal pool. The thing is, I am not even part of this HOA. Let's dive right into the video. And the first one is titled, Am I the jerk for sending my HOA trespassing and gun defense laws after they took photos on my property? So my wife and I bought our dream home about a year ago. It's in a nice neighborhood with good schools and friendly neighbors, or so we thought. The HOA seemed pretty relaxed when we were buying the place, not too many rules, reasonable monthly fees, and they maintained the common areas well. One of their main rules is that you cannot have a camper visible from the street. This was not a problem for us since we'd been planning to buy an RV for years and I'd already checked both the HOA rules and county regulations. In our county, you cannot have a camper parked in front of your house, meaning the area directly in front of your front door is considered the front of the house, but you can have it on your property in other spots as long as it is not an eyesore. We bought our first camper 3 weeks after moving in. It is nothing fancy, just a 24-foot travel trailer we got for weekend getaways with the kids. Since I knew about the HOA rules, I immediately hired a contractor and had a driveway extension port that runs along the side of our house and into the backyard. It cost nearly $5,000, but it was worth it to follow the rules and have convenient access to our camper. Our house is at the end of a cul-de-sac, so you can only see the camper if you walk into our side yard. It is not visible from the street at all. I even checked with our immediate neighbors, Doris and Ralph, before doing the work. I just wanted to make sure you guys are okay with this, I told them, showing the plans for the driveway extension. The camper will be parked back here, but obviously you will be able to see it from your backyard. Doris just waved her hand. Oh, don't worry about it. Ralph had an RV for years before we downsized. As long as you're not running a generator all night, we don't mind one bit. Everything was fine for about 3 months. We took the camper out twice for weekend trips and it sat quietly in our backyard the rest of the time. But then one day, I got home from work to find a letter from the HOA in my mailbox. I opened it while walking into the house and nearly tripped over my own feet when I saw what was inside. It was a violation notice claiming our camper was visible from the street, accompanied by a photo of the trailer. The strange thing was that this photo was clearly taken standing in my side yard, not from the street. No way could you see the camper from the street unless you had a drone or you were standing on my property. My wife was in the kitchen making dinner when I walked in with the letter. "What is that?" she asked when she saw my face. "Someone from the HOA came onto our property to take a picture of the camper," I said, showing her the letter and photo. "Look at this angle. They had to be standing right next to the air conditioning unit to get this shot." She frowned. "That cannot be legal. They cannot just walk onto our property, can they?" "No, they absolutely cannot," I said, my blood pressure rising. "This is trespassing, plain and simple." The violation notice demanded that we move the camper off-site within 7 days or face a $100 per day fine. I was furious. We had specifically bought a house at the end of the street and spent thousands on a driveway extension to comply with the rules. I called the HOA management company the next morning. "Hello, I received a violation notice about my camper and I would like to discuss it," I said as politely as I could manage when someone finally answered. "What is your address?" the woman asked in a bored tone. I gave her the address and she pulled up our file. "Yes, recreational vehicles must not be visible from the street. We have photographic evidence that yours is." "That's exactly my issue," I replied. "The photo in the notice was taken while standing on my private property. Someone trespassed to take the picture. The camper is not visible from any public area." "Sir, I don't know where the photo was taken from, but our compliance officer reported the violation." "Can I speak to this compliance officer?" I asked. "He doesn't take calls directly. You can file an appeal if you disagree with the violation." I took a deep breath. I'll do that, but I also want to file a formal complaint about someone entering my property without any permission. "I will make a note of that," she said in a tone that suggested no note would be made. After hanging up, I drafted an appeal letter documenting exactly where the camper was parked, including detailed measurements showing it was not visible from the street. I took photos from various points along the street to prove my point. I also included a copy of our county's regulations about RV parking, which we were following to the letter. For good measure, I installed a couple of security cameras pointing at the driveway and the side yard. If anyone came onto our property again, I would have them on video. A week later, I got a response to my appeal. It was denied. The letter simply stated that, upon review, the violation stands. With no explanation of how they came to that conclusion, the $100 daily fine would begin in 3 days. My wife was reading over my shoulder as I opened the second letter. "This is ridiculous," she said. "They did not even address your point about the trespassing." No, they didn't. I agreed, my jaw clenched, but I'm not paying a fine for a rule I'm not even breaking. That evening, I was out checking the mail when I noticed a guy I didn't recognize walking along the sidewalk, slowing down as he approached our house. He had a clipboard and a camera around his neck, and when he saw me, he nodded but kept walking. I went back inside, but something felt off. I checked our new security camera feed about 20 minutes later, and sure enough, the same guy was in our side yard taking pictures of the camper. I saved the video and immediately called the police non-emergency line to report the trespassing. An officer came out about an hour later and took my statement and a copy of the video. She said there wasn't much they could do since there was no damage to the property, but she did file a report for me and gave me the case number. You might want to post no trespassing signs, she suggested. Makes it easier to prosecute if they come back. Well, the next day, I installed 4 very visible no trespassing signs around our property. I also sent a certified letter to the HOA management company with the police report number, a copy of the security footage, and a formal cease and desist demanding they stop entering our property without permission. I made it clear that the camper was not visible from the street and included all the photographic evidence again. 2 days later, I got a call from someone claiming to be the HOA board president, a man named Victor. "Mr. OP, I'm calling about your letter," he said, sounding irritated. "Our compliance officers have the right to inspect properties for violation." "Well, not without permission, they don't," I replied. "Your covenants may allow for inspections, but they don't override state and county trespassing laws. Your guy entered clearly marked private property without permission or notice." "Well, we have multiple complaints about your camper," he said, changing tactics. "From whom?" I asked. "My immediate neighbors have no issues with it. It's not visible from the street, so who exactly is complaining?" "I'm not at liberty to say," he replied stiffly. "But the fines will continue to accrue until you remedy the situation." I was done being nice. "I will tell you what, Victor, I'm not paying a penny for a violation that doesn't even exist. If you want to come see for yourself that the camper is not visible from the street, you're welcome to, but stay on the sidewalk. And if your compliance officer comes onto my property again without my permission, I will press charges for trespassing." He sputtered something about community standards, but I'd already made up my mind. I was not gonna be bullied. The next day, another letter arrived from the HOA. This one had a picture of our driveway extension claiming it was an unapproved modification to the property and demanding that we remove it and restore the yard to its original condition within 30 days. The kicker? This photo was again taken from our side yard, not from the street. And that is when I completely lost my patience. I sat down at my computer and spent hours researching our state's property laws, trespassing statutes, and even self-defense laws that outlined when property owners could use force to defend their property. I compiled all this information into a letter along with printouts of the relevant laws. I also went through our HOA covenants with a fine-tooth comb and discovered that they had failed to follow their own procedures for issuing violations. They were required to give written notice of an inspection at least 48 hours in advance, which they had never done. I sent this package of information to the HOA board, the management company, and for good measure to every board member individually at their home address, which were public record as part of the HOA corporation filing. My letter was direct and to the point. "I have documented multiple instances of your representatives trespassing on my property. I have installed security cameras and no trespassing signs as advised by local law enforcement. Any further unauthorized entry onto my property will result in immediate calls to the police and trespassing charges being filed. Also, I am well within my legal rights to defend my property under state law. Additionally, the HOA has failed to follow its own procedures for property inspections and violation notices. The camper is not visible from any public space and is in full compliance with both HOA regulations and county ordinances. The driveway extension was completed to ensure compliance with these regulations. I will not be removing either the camper or the driveway extension, nor will I be paying any fines for these non-existent violations. I expect all current and future fines to be rescinded within 7 days, or I will be forced to seek legal remedies, including filing a harassment complaint and seeking damages for the stress and inconvenience this situation has caused my family." I then attached the county's trespassing laws and a section on lawful defense of property, which included the right to use reasonable force to remove trespassers. I did not explicitly mention firearms, but the law I cited certainly covered that aspect of property defense. 3 days after sending this letter, I got an email from the HOA management company. All violations and fines had been rescinded. They claimed it was an administrative error and apologized for the miscommunication. There was no mention of the trespassing or the threatening letter I had sent. A week later, I was working in the front yard when a luxury SUV pulled up to our house. A well-dressed older man got out and approached me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. OP, I'm Victor Hamilton, president of the HOA board. I thought it might be good to talk in person." I put down my rake and crossed my arms. "Sure, what can I do for you?" He looked around nervously and said, "I wanted to clear the air about the camper situation. We've had some turnover in our management company and mistakes were made." "Mistakes like trespassing on my property multiple times?" I asked. He winced. "Yes, that was completely unacceptable. Our new policy requires all inspection photos to be taken from public areas only." "Well, that's good to hear," I said, not making it any easier for him. He cleared his throat. "Some of the board members were concerned about your letter, particularly the references to property defense laws." I just stared at him silently. "We're a peaceful community," he continued uncomfortably. "There's no need for things to escalate to that level." "I agree completely," I said. "As long as people respect private property boundaries, everyone stays peaceful. I'm glad we understand each other." He nodded quickly. "Well, consider the matter resolved. Your camper and driveway are fully compliant with our regulations. Have a nice day." As he hurried back to his SUV, I couldn't help but smile. It had been a month of stress and frustration, but standing our ground actually had worked. That evening, I told my wife about Victor's visit. "So they are backing off completely?" she asked. "Seems that way," I said. "Amazing how quickly they changed their tune when they realized we were not gonna be pushed around." "Do you think it was the legal citations that did it or the gun laws?" she asked with a smirk. I shrugged. "Probably a bit of both. Either way, I don't think we'll be hearing from them about the camper again." And well, it's been 6 months and we haven't had any more trouble with the HOA. We have taken the camper out for several trips and no one has complained or sent violation notices. I even saw Victor at the neighborhood barbecue last month and he went out of his way to avoid me. So Reddit, am I the a-hole for sending my HOA trespassing and gun defense laws after they took photos on my property? Some of our friends actually think that I went too far by implying I might defend my property with force, but I think I was justified given the repeated trespassing and harassment. And yeah guys, let me know what you think about this in the comments. Do you think OP went too far or would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Edit. A lot of people are asking if I actually own a gun, and yes, I do have several legally owned and properly stored firearms. I'm a responsible gun owner, however, I never specifically mentioned guns in my communication with the HOA, I simply cited the relevant laws regarding property defense, which includes sections about reasonable force as mentioned before. Comment number 1, not the a-hole, HOAs are notorious for overstepping boundaries and abusing their power. You did not threaten anyone, you simply informed them of the laws that protect your property rights. They were the ones breaking the law by trespassing. Comment number 2, you are the a-hole. As a responsible gun owner myself, I'm disgusted by people who use the implication of firearms to intimidate others in non-life-threatening situations. You basically sent a mess with me and find out message, which is completely inappropriate for a neighborhood dispute. Comment number 3, everyone sucks here. The HOA was definitely wrong for trespassing, but you went from 0 to implied threats real quick here. There were other steps you could have taken, like requesting a formal hearing with the full board or getting a cease and desist from an attorney before bringing gun laws into it. And yeah guys, as I said, let's see what you have to say in the comments. I'm really curious about this one. And the next one is the title story, which is titled HOA President Dug Up My Yard to Build a Pool. So when I built a new home, I made sure to read and ask about everything I was signing. Maybe it was me being a cautious first-time homeowner or just my personality, but I like to know exactly what I'm getting into ahead of time. Not a single thing I signed or was told about mentioned an HOA, and I signed nothing agreeing to join one. I did not want to be part of an HOA, but that could be related to my past issues with the condo I was living in before. There were strict rules and I was getting letters and complaints about things I couldn't control, like my baby crying once in a while. It was part of the reason that I left and decided to get a new home. Another being that with my first child hitting the toddler stage and my wife being pregnant during the time of this story, we needed a bigger place. Our first months there were great, and most of the people that we spoke to were friendly or at the very least cordial. It was not really the neighborhood where people are gonna see somebody moving in and flock to try and get to know you. People like privacy, and I can understand that. It took months for me to meet somebody that I didn't like, and it was not in the way that I expected to meet somebody. Now, I go to work pretty early in the morning, as does my wife. Our little one gets dropped off at daycare, so like many homes in the area, it's empty during the day. By the time we got home, all we could see was that a hole was being dug in our backyard and the giant digger that was left there. I had no clue what to make of this and no way to ask anybody what was going on. My wife suggested that a pipe must have burst and the city brought in a crew to fix it, which made sense to me. I know it's a private property, but if the town or city needs to get access to a pipeline or electrical pole, you cannot really stop them, right? And I wouldn't want to. I still decided to call work the next morning and get approval to come in later. My wife and son left and I waited to see who would show up. Workers came and I decided to go out and speak to them about what they were doing and how long it was gonna take. I was curious and asked if they came because of a burst pipe and if I should be worried about my sinks and toilets. Well, most of the workers did not seem to understand me due to a language issue, but one did and came to speak to me. He told me that they were digging up the yard to fit in the new pool that was issued to be built. I told them that I never paid for a pool to be built. There were a lot of back and forth before I finally got the piece of information that made things start to come together. They had been hired by an HOA who had paperwork saying that they owned the property. I wanted them to stop what they were doing, but they said that I didn't have the authority and had to speak to the HOA president. I got his name from them and knew at this point that I was not going to be making it into work that day. It felt weird just going up to somebody's house that I never met, but I was pretty angry about the whole thing. I know some of you might be reading this and thinking, whoa, calm down, you're getting a free pool. Well, the problem is that I know a pool plus a toddler and a baby is beyond dangerous. I wanted to use the backyard space to build them an area they could play in. The pool project seemed to be taking the entire backyard space up. On top of that, I was worried about the fact that they were able to do this in the first place. I don't know what their plan for the pool was, but I could be sure it was not some gift for my family. It took about 2 minutes for me to realize that the HOA president was a real jackass, but I will let the conversation I had with him speak for itself. Me, hey, I live on this address and I wanted to speak to you about some workers digging up my backyard. HOA president, where's that again? Me, about 3 blocks that way. HOA president, oh right, the pool project, did they run into an issue? Usually they would just call me. Me, yes, there's a big problem. That is my yard and I never agreed to a pool being built there. I want them to stop digging and fix the backyard. HOA president, whoa, slow down. Just because you own the house, you think it means you own the yard? Think again. The yard is HOA property and I can do whatever I want with it. And what I want is a community pool to be built there. Me, my yard is not part of any kind of HOA. HOA president, the entire property is, the house too. Me, I never signed forms agreeing to be in an HOA or forfeiting any property to you. HOA president, people want a place to cool off in the summer. You bought a house in an HOA and that means you're a part of it. And your property can be used for HOA reasons. So unless you want me to get you trespassed off my property, you can turn around and leave. This guy was seriously not gonna stop unless I was able to force him to do so. I sent copies of my land ownership and everything I signed, making a point to show that none of the paperwork was for me to join an HOA. Even if one did exist, I never joined it. The papers also showed the exact boundaries of my property, which helped prove that the yard was part of it, not just the house. My wife probably listened to me ranting for about an hour that night as I tried to come up with something I could do. With a baby on the way, I didn't want to have to pay for a lawyer unless I really had to, so my first step would be speaking to other neighbors and trying to find property records in the town hall, since things like that should be public record. Speaking to people, it seemed I was not the only person that seemed to be forced into the HOA without signing up for it. The HOA told them the same thing that they told me, the property was HOA property, so signing up did not matter. They would just enforce whatever rules they wanted and the president would brush off anybody's complaints. People talked about being fined hundreds for things they did not even know were against the rules because nobody could find the HOA bylaws. They were like some big secret until one of them got broken and a fine was issued. Looking at property records, I was able to find the jackpot. There were records of my property with me being the owner. There were also records for my exact same property, but these had the HOA president's name on them. The dates were the same too. I found out way later that he found a flaw in the system and manipulated it. There was a window of timing that he was able to file himself as the property owner and get the paperwork, but I would be the one in the computer systems and everything else. A timing issue between the forms being sent into the town hall and then processed into the system. I started looking through multiple property records, mainly staying to within about 5 years and all newly purchased homes. On each one the same thing, with him owning the property on paper, not for him personally, but claiming it was HOA community space. I took these records to all the affected homeowners and explained to the best that I could at the time what he had done. We all pooled together for a lawyer who looked at this evidence like it was Christmas Day. Apparently, I had done a lot of the heavy lifting for him and the paperwork was a smoking gun, he was the person who was able to explain to us how he managed to get away with it for so long, and also letting us know that manipulating public records was also a criminal offense and he would alert the DA office about it. As for our mass lawsuit against him, we wanted damages back. Any money he had taken for fines from everybody else would need to be returned. The pool project would be shut down and my yard returned to its previous state, not to mention pain and suffering damages for everybody all around. The records were fixed, so his were removed and they would no longer have any kind of claim to our properties. From what I heard, criminal court was not easy for him either. It was impossible to explain away what he had done as some kind of accident, since it was clear what he had been doing and showing how he had benefited from it. The rest of the HOA was able to get away without being in trouble, claiming they did not even know what he was doing. That was never made clear if they were just covering for themselves, but only the president got in legal trouble, facing more fines and narrowly escaping any prison time. The other HOA members ended up stepping down anyway, and the entire thing was reconstructed with new people. People that made it clear that the HOA was voluntary, and if people wanted to join, they could, but nobody would be forced. Plus, their rules would actually still be accessible. I did not join after that because I think HOAs are just bad ideas. I was glad to have my yard fixed so I could start preparing a play area for my kids, and with the money we got, we had a nice cushion for when the baby came. It worked out in my favor, but I kinda wished that it didn't happen in the first place. I just hope that he learned his lesson and I won't be hearing about a new scheme from him anytime in the future. Before we end the video, we will read one last story from r/PettyRevenge. It is titled, "He would not stop calling, so I let him know what it is like." Okay, so my ex. He's controlling and manipulative and just flat out mean to me. I've been trying to get away from his grip since November 2023. So here we are now. I would block his number, but he would call restricted over and over. There was just no winning. I finally blocked him for the last time and ignored every one of his blocked calls. He would reach out to my friends and show up at my job. I've made police reports, but since he is not threatening me, they cannot do much. So then yesterday, I finally answered the restricted call. I ever so nicely asked him to please just leave me alone. He said he will never leave me alone. I hung up. Enough was enough. So since then, I've signed up for every insurance quote I could think of with his phone number, posting free ads on Craigslist with his number and anything I can think of. He called again this morning and thanked me because his phone has not stopped ringing. I denied having any involvement and asked why he would think it would be me, and his response was, "Well, because I keep calling and you won't leave me alone." Well, at least he is self-aware. He wanted my energy, he's got it. Be careful what you ask for. And yeah guys, maybe I would also sign that guy up for Scientology or something, or maybe Jehovah's Witnesses. That seems like a nice idea. Either way, thank you for watching, I will see you again tomorrow.